Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of PodSaveChocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about 15 years of the Good Food Awards. So stay tuned. We're going to do a deep dive, blow by blow. You're going to learn more about the awards than you thought you ever wanted to know about them. But before we do that, I want to get into some homework about what's going on today. So the first one of which is that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode, is sponsored by the members of The Chocolate Life. This is the homepage of The Chocolate Life. You can go there right now. I've got a link to today's post. We'll explore that. You can find all sorts of information. And then there's this magic green button near the top, and that's a join button. So if you're not a member, you can go become a member and support the work that we do here on The Chocolate Life. It's greatly appreciated. Plus, you can like, subscribe, share, do all the things that people ask you to do with the videos, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. You can also go into the live chat on YouTube or into the comments in LinkedIn and Facebook and let me know where in the world you are connecting from. And I will get your shout out up on screen and say thank you very much, but also to acknowledge that this is an international audience, which I'd love to do. And also, if you do have a question or a comment, ask it. And what I will do is I will get that up on screen, acknowledge it. And if there's a question, I will do my best to answer it during the course of the episode. And with that, let's jump in. So this is the post for today's episode, and I'm going to hide that. All right, so here's the post for today's episode, and I do a post for every episode of Pod Save Chocolate. You can find those under the archive links up here. So there's an archive that'll take you to 101 to the current one. We're at 134. Or if you click on the down arrow, you can look at the first 100 episodes as well as the archive for the Chocolate Life Live. So all of the posts for each episode of the Chocolate Life Live and Pod Save Chocolate are available, and you can go hunt around and figure out what you're looking for. So with that, the post is a run of show. So it gives you the order that I'm going to do things in, and there are resources that are going to be mentioned in the episode. So rather than having to follow along and copy them from the screen, which can be very, very difficult to read, you can follow along with me in a second screen, or you can come back at any later time and read through these things directly. But before I begin the sort of deep dive, there's a little bit of background. So I have been involved with the Good Food Awards since very early on. I was asked by two people, Susie Wyshak and Seneca Klassen, to help contribute to what good meant. So the guidelines for what good meant in the chocolate category of the Good Foods Awards for the first year, which was 2011. And I happily collaborated with Susie and Seneca, and if there were other members of the committee, on what good meant in the context of chocolate. And then before the 2013 round, I was asked to contribute to the guidelines for the confections category. Now, I've never judged the chocolate category. But I have judged the confections category at least twice. I believe in 2014 and 2015 for sure, but I may have done one earlier. I don't recollect if I've done that. So I've had this long-standing connection with the Good Food Awards from the very beginning. And a lot of my friends have entered the awards and won awards. Now, fortunately, the judging process is de-identified. I didn't necessarily know I was voting for people when I was judging their products. But it was always great to be at the awards ceremonies. So I've been to the awards announcements. They did it at the Palace of Fine Arts a number of years. They did the first versions of the Mercantile at the Pier in San Francisco. It's just really been a phenomenal experience. And I know that a lot of people have been really happy with their participation in the awards program. But what I want to point out here is that the organizers of awards programs, I believe, have taken on a duty of care with respect to how they not only promote their winners, but also how they make sure that the data about the winners remains current and accessible. So for example, if I have a list of winners from 2011, then maybe I should on a regular basis go check to see if the URLs for these companies still work, right? And there's that aspect of duty of care, but for the most part, the way the data are presented on the websites are often extremely difficult to get at. So the underlying data to pull off of the page, to scrape them off the page, right? Because what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to compare the results from one year to the next year, or to be able to get all the data from all the years and to be able to generate some trends. And I've done that for the International Chocolate Awards for individual years. I've done it for the Academy of Chocolate for individual years, for the Northwest Chocolate Festival for individual years. And I've discovered a bunch of problems. But I decided that this year for the Good Food Awards was a little bit special because this is the 15th year. This is the 15th year of the Good Food Awards, and they didn't have a traditional entry round for this year. What they did is they went to their community, and they asked their community to vote on favorite winners from the past. And so if you go to the awards page and the winners page, what you'll do is you'll find that in the year 2025, which is over here, for all categories, right? You'll find that there is a list of, I believe, 55 winners in all categories. But there are no more than three. I'm going to go to chocolate. But there are three winners in the chocolate category. And these represent Ashkenazi chocolate for their 62% dark milk fleur de sel sea salt bar, the Dick Taylor craft chocolate 72-cent Belize Toledo, and Chocolato small batch chocolate in Atlanta, Georgia, for their ripple effect bar. And so these three bars were winners in previous competitions. Right? This doesn't say which year, which I think is a mistake. But you'll notice that there's another thing here, which is that the Ashkenazi here is not. Let's bring this up a little bit bigger. That Ashkenazi is not a working URL. I can't link to the Ashkenazi website. For some reason, it's a working URL for the Dick Taylor website, and it's not working for Chocolato small batch. And so we find this little inconsistency that there's information missing. If this is supposed to be the best of the previous 14 years, then which year was this initially recognized? And then, as you can see, it's inconsistent in terms of why a URL for Dick Taylor and why not URLs for the other ones. If we go to the confections category, we'll find that there are four winners. Not certain why there are four rather than three. It's not quite clear. But we get the Special Reserve Putnam Rye Whiskey from Goodnow Farms. Again, no URL. Chocolate-covered rye honeycomb from Honeymoon Chocolates in St. Louis. I got to say a little story. I don't know if this is the same company that I judged back in 2015. But 2015, when I was a judge in the confections category, somebody was doing a dark chocolate-covered raw honeycomb. And I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was a really, really great product. And I gave it my highest recommendation, in part because I hadn't seen it before. Or if I'd seen it before, I wasn't really aware of it. So this is, actual honeycomb with honey and wax covered in chocolate. I mean, insanely good. But another one of my judges went and said, is honey sustainable? And therefore decided not to vote for it, which meant that it got knocked out for awards consideration. And the challenge for me with that is that by the time it got to us judges for the tasting, we had to assume that, barring some final vetting, that the company misrepresented their sourcing practices or something else like that. We were just to assume that the product met all the guidelines. And so, that honey was sustainable. And as a matter of fact, I believe at the time, it may not have been at the time, but there is a honey category, right, which is highlighted right here. So kicking this out because one judge didn't think it was quote unquote sustainable and therefore not good was a mistake. Phenomenal product. I don't know if Honeymoon was the company back in 2015. They didn't win. Phenomenal product. But this Herbs de Provence from Jardy Chocolates. Again, not, no working URL. And this Neo Cocoa Black Sesame Seed Toffee Brittle. So again, we have inconsistencies. Why are there URLs for some companies? Why not for others? And why don't we know what year they won the award? So I have those challenges with the data. The other challenge is that I have to go to each year in order to be able to get the results. Right? So I have to go to 2024 in confections to find the data from the pages. I can't go, oh, I want to see all years for confections or all years for chocolate. Now, I can make the argument is if they did this all years version of it, they would want to be able to indicate the year in which the product was recognized, it won an award, and so they need to generate at least two different versions of the page from an underlying database, if in fact that's where the data comes from. And so we've already got some challenges associated with this. What I did, and I hope this comes as no surprise to anybody, is that I spent some time working with 3 different AIs, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, and Claude, to figure out how I could go about automate the scraping of these pages. How am I going to get the data off the pages in a way that was going to be helpful to me, right? Because I have to get all the data off these pages and put them into a form that is amenable to analysis, right? In order to be able to do the work that I want to do. And it turns out that ChatGPT did an okay job on some pages, but didn't do it consistently. I couldn't get Gemini to be consistent. I couldn't get Claude to be consistent either. I even asked Claude to generate a DTT, a document type descriptor, and I said, here is where on these pages you can expect to find the data. And here are examples of what the data are going to look like. And then, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to use the information that I've given you about the structure of the page to be able to go and download all the data off the page. And it turned out that it worked for 1 or 2 pages. It wouldn't work for more pages. It was a mess. Now, you may also see that I'm going to go more towards the chocolate page. I'm going to go back to the chocolate page. And you'll see that some of the winning entries have a percentage associated with them. So there's this 70% Hacienda Victoria, this 55% Tamaco Bound Butter, 70%. So one of the things I wanted to do is in previous times when I've done this scraping by hand, I've actually created a separate column in my spreadsheet. And what I've done is I've copied this data by hand. So I've gone into each line and I've copied it without the percentage sign. And as you can imagine, it is a right royal pain in the behind to be able to do that consistently. It's tedious, it's boring, it is error prone, it's a real challenge. But what I was able to do finally is I was able to generate a prompt which worked every single time. And the prompt talked about the fact that there were so there was a name, a product name, a company name with a URL. There was a city and a state, right, where they were located. And I could say, if there is a percentage sign, if there is a percentage, go grab the numbers associated with the percentage and put it into its own column. Really, really good. I had to do an exception. A couple of the names have a vertical pipe symbol in the name. So the AI would separate that into 2 columns. And there were lots of tiny special exceptions that needed to be written into the prompt, right? But eventually I was able to get it done. And what I'm going to show you now is the results of what that looks like. And what I've got here actually is something, you're not going to read it, doesn't really matter, it's not appropriate, but I just want to give you an idea of what this data looks like. And I just noticed that there is a change that I need to make to it, right? Which I've just done. And so I'm going to be doing a little error checking, but I'm going to be sending this data off, this spreadsheet off, to the organizers of the Good Food Awards. And so what they can do is they have an idea about what the differences are between, uh, they've got an idea of, like, uh, for example, Fruition Chocolate in Spokane, New York is sometimes listed as Fruition Chocolate, and sometimes it's listed as Fruition Chocolate Works. And we'll find that sometime, the URL has changed, like from Fruition Chocolate to Fruition Chocolate Works. And so I have a column here that says, for example, this is the original company name that was from the pages on the website. And what I've done is I've gone in, made sure that every name occurs uniquely on the list and it's spelled the same way and referred to as the same way at the same time. For example, the Cleveland Chocolate Company in one version had a period after the co, and another version it didn't have a period after the co. Now I could tell the AI to do this once I realized that it had been done. So dedupe, pick one of them and put it back in. But that is a lot. It turns out it's easier to do manually. Then I have the original URL, right? If there's a blank line here, it means there's no URL for this. And then what I did is I copied every single one of the URLs from, and filled in the missing ones. I copied every single one of the URLs and went through a URL checker and says, is this URL still working? So that's a 202, I believe. Yes, it's revisible. And then I created this column called URL status change, in which if there were a change to the URL, for example, this doesn't have an SSL certificate, so it's not reachable, or it used to be this version and it's now this version. Right? So hopefully what will happen is I can give this to the organizers, and notice that I also have the year all the way over here, as well as the category. And so they have everything they need in order to be able to go help reduce the amount of labor that they need to do in order to be able to bring their website up to date. And there's enough going on here so that if they're in the Bay Area, they could easily find some programmer to be able to automate a bunch of this, at least the URL checking and things like that, to make sure that everything's okay. But I wanted to do this because what I learned as a part of doing this is that it was really difficult. No, it was impossible, because the data from the Good Food Awards is spread across multiple pages for each category. So there are 15 pages of chocolate awards, and there are 13 pages of confections awards. I needed to consolidate them all into one place in order to be able to do any sort of analysis on the awards. And that was why I put everything into a spreadsheet, because one of the things I could do with the spreadsheet is I could upload a CSV version of the file. And so when I go do my Gemini prompt, I can attach a CSV file. And I can say, using the attached CSV file, perform the following analysis. And I didn't have to rely on Gemini trying to figure out what was on the page in order to do it. And I could give it all of the results from all of the pages at the same time in order to be able to do its analysis. Really, really cool. So it was a lot of work. It was a lot less work than if I had to do it by hand, because I was able to involve some processes. But for example, neither ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude had a reliable URL checker. I could not use them to check the URLs to find out what the status of the URL was. So I had to generate an individual list of the URLs, go to a separate URL checker, check them one at a time, and if they returned an error, try to figure out if the error was a timeout error and the site is still working, or for some reason the connection was closed, or if it wasn't reachable, was it an SSL error? Was it the DNS did not resolve? Was there, for many errors that were generated, I went into Adia as an interface to ChatGPT, and I said, is this company still in business? And that's what you're looking at in the spreadsheet, all those kinds of things. So in a ridiculous amount of work, but I felt that I wanted to do it so that I could run some analysis against the entire thing. So I'm going to show you a bunch of the different things that I learned about this. And I'm doing this in part because I want to encourage every company that does an awards program to do everything they possibly can to make sure that the data associated with their awards is fresh. Right? URLs, it is incumbent upon the awards organizers, I believe, to say that if they publish a URL on their website, that they make sure that the URL works. Or if a company has gone out of business, that they indicate that the company is no longer in business. And by the way, that's not a company going out of business is not any kind of slight on the awards program itself. I mean, it's merely an indicator that these are tough businesses to be in. And not everybody who wins an award survives in the long run. Really, really important distinction. But how many of these companies that have won awards over the course of 15 years are still in business, right? Or if they've moved, or if they've been purchased. For example, TheChocolateLife is no longer independent. It's not. I forget who their owner is. American Licorice, right? You know, there's a lot of metadata around this, which turns out to be really interesting, which is why I want to know. And one of the things that I want to do is, listen, if I've got a canonical list that the organizers can refer to, it makes their job easier in the long run. So I'm doing it. But I immediately ran into problems, as I described. It was, right, the pages on the Good Food Awards were really, really difficult to find a prompt that the AI could read reliably. Right, and that's it. And then I'm on a particular plan with Claude that once I get to a certain number of tokens, I think it's 200,000, it says, I'm done. I can't do anymore. You're going to have to start over in a new chat to get stuff done. So that was a challenge. Okay, so ideally, what I wanted to do, what I'd hoped to be able to do is I'd be able to say, here's the URL of all the winners, right? And then you can go and you can find out, oh, right, there's a control on the page that lets you pick a year, and then there's a control on the page that lets you pick a category, chocolate and confections. And what I want to do is I want you to iterate through the list from 2011 to 2025 for each of the years, and for each of the categories, chocolate and confections, I want you to go and grab the data off the page. Couldn't figure out a way to get it done. Now, it could be that I'm not a good enough a prompt writer. It could be that maybe if I had a better knowledge of JSON, I could construct something that would do it. I don't know the answer to the question. I couldn't get it done. So in the end, what I ended up doing was I was able to find a prompt where I was able to copy the data from individual pages. So if we go back to the Good Food Awards page, what I was able to do was I was able to write a prompt, go back to the chocolate page, where what I did is I copied all of this data, right, into the prompt. And I said, when you search for the page, here's exactly what you're looking for. And so the prompt worked perfectly every single time, didn't have to worry about it. It generated a table, and I copied the table and put it into the spreadsheet, and it worked perfectly every single time. However, it means that there were 15 plus 13, there were 28 different queries that I needed to run in order to be able to get it done. A lot faster than doing it by hand. I can assure you that, because among other things, what it would do is if there was a URL, it would extract the URL. If there was a percentage, it would extract the percentage, right? It would split out the Springfield and Missouri, so the city and state, into separate columns for me automatically. I mean, a lot of this I was able to automate so that the tedious work of, I am going to copy this off the page and then figure out how to reorient it by hand, didn't have to do. So in the long run, really, really helpful. I mean, it worked really, really well, but still 28 queries where I had hoped to be able to get it down to 1 or 3, at the most, so I picked the chocolate category, go pick all years for the chocolate category. And I tried many, many ways, several hours. It was, challenging and interesting for me as a way to think about how the data are encoded on the page. Is there any markup on the page that I could use? That was why I put together the DTD. Is there any markup on the page that I can use to be able to help figure this out? Can I ask the AI to be able to determine the structure of the page so it can do it? And right, in the end, what I had to do is I actually had to provide, in this case, Claude, the one that worked flawlessly, with all of the data that were on the page, and then it was able to do everything perfectly. So that was great. And so here are some of the things that I learned. Um, and it's really important to understand that I ran this analysis using Claude, and then I ran an analysis on the spreadsheet. So I did all of these analyses from the spreadsheet, and identifying individual columns for AI to go take a look at. Um, I also ran this in Gemini, giving it the entire spreadsheet and just said, do deep research and figure something out. And the numbers that are returned are different, right? And the reason why is they're counting different things in different ways. And so this is one aspect of using AIs this way, LLMs this way, is you need to be very careful and check their work, because you can have two different LLMs run against exactly the same data set, and they will generate slightly different answers, right? And you need to understand why they're generating different answers and what it means. And because you're using two different AIs, you can't ask one what the other one was thinking, although that would be really cool if there were a way to do that. But so generating a table like the one you see here would be ridiculously complicated. And I apologize if I wasn't sharing my screen previously. I may not have been sharing this when I was showing um, things like, oh, there's a URL here, there's no URL here. What I have to do is I have to copy all of this and feed it to the prompt. If I wasn't, I'm staring at you, I'm not staring at my screen over there. And so it was out of my line of sight to some extent. But anyway, generating a table like this, right, which is the total number of winners in each category by year, to do by hand is non-trivial. Now, there are a couple of ways that I do that, and I haven't done it in this spreadsheet because I didn't need to. Is that what I'll do is I'll insert another column in here, and I will literally count them: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I will literally put a count in there just by using an Excel function, right? So I can do that. But in this case, I didn't have to do it. The Claude did it right away. So I learned that in the 2011 category, there were 7 winners in chocolate, none in confections in 2011 and 12, which I knew because there were no competitions those 2 years. But I was able to get the distribution and put it in a really pretty table and just copy the markdown, and it bang, there it was. Right? So I've got that. So that would have been challenging. There were 412 awards in 15 years. Now, keep in mind that of those 412, 7 of them are double counts. So there are actually 405 unique winners, right? 7 of them are in the 2015 retrospective of here are the products that members of the community have voted on. So that's something to consider in this, but it does give you a good idea. So all of the 2015 entries down here are double counted. Just something to consider. Let me see if I can get this a little bigger and make it a little easier to see. So I was also able to ask it just, give me a list of all the companies with, sorted by the number of awards. So, from the top, this company won the most awards, then this company won the next most, go all the way down. And I was able to take that list and work with it. However, I quickly ran into the problem, which I talked about here, is that, for example, at some point, one of the companies in Portland, Batch PDX, right, was absorbed or merged or something like that into Creo Chocolate. And so the question becomes, should everything consolidate under the new owner, Creo Chocolate, or should we recognize the fact that Batch PDX was an independent entity? Interesting question. I don't know the answer, but if you were to go to the Batch PDX website, you may not get to the Creo Chocolate website, which is one of the things that I learned. Batch PDX, there was an error there. Somebody had misconfigured the changes in the DNS and ownership records, so that Batch PDX was not being reliably forwarded to Creo Chocolate. That's an observation to be made. The other one is that, and this is I didn't catch until after I published the table, is that Fruition Chocolate is listed as Fruition Chocolate in the table, and Fruition Chocolate Works. So with Fruition Chocolate Works being a more modern version of the company name and website name. Unfortunately, so right, so we don't necessarily want to go to Fruition Chocolate and rely on DNS forwarding to Fruition Chocolate Works. What we want to do is we want to say, hey, let's go to Fruition Chocolate Works. Historically, the organizers of the award can say, well, the name of the company at the time they won was Fruition Chocolate. We're going to keep it that way. Their decision editorially. What I want to do is I want to note that it has been changed, but I want to use the version of it, which is going to be much more reliable, which is the current version is much more reliable. Right. Um, right. But when we come to the number of winners that are on this page, number one, there's no distinction between companies that are in business and companies that are out of business. So that's important to know. But number two is that it's also really important to know that this is a self-selected list. So this represents companies and products that have been recognized because they have entered their products into the competition. And so the universe, we don't know the universe. We only know the people who won. We don't have any understanding of how many companies. I don't necessarily need to know the name to companies, but I'd like to know how many companies and how many products were entered that didn't make it into the judging round for one reason or another. And then what we can do is we can say, oh, there were 405 individual winners out of a total of 1,000 companies who entered. So we get an idea about how selective the awards are. So that information, to the best of my knowledge, is not public. I will ask for it if they have it. I'm not at all sure that data is easily accessible. But number one, the most awarded company in the history of the Good Food Awards in the chocolate and confections category combined is Patrick Chocolate. So Alan McClure in Missouri, Patrick Chocolate won a total of 26 awards and really highly deserves. Technically excellent chocolate maker. He is got a great sense of flavor, but is no longer making chocolate. He's now consulting. So this, when was the last time Patrick Chocolate won an award? I could go figure that out. It's not important for the purpose of this. We have Batch PDX, which I talked about, is now part of Creo Chocolate. Creo's down here at number 10. If we tied the two of them together, it's 21 total awards. So putting them in second place, I think. We've got Fruition Chocolate at third, but again, there's Fruition Chocolate Works down here towards the bottom. And so what we'd really want to do is we'd want to add these three to these 11, 14, keeping them in third place. So even using an AI to work with this data, the AI only knows what it knows, right? And if I'm working with a snapshot of the data in a spreadsheet to make certain kinds of analysis easier, then this is what you're going to get. You need to go back through all of the results and all of the data when you're looking at, oh my gosh, it seems like there are some challenges here. And so one of the things that I've done in the spreadsheet, right, is I've updated every time. So I've got an original company name here, and then I've got, I've made the little changes. Like, so every time Fruition Chocolate appears, it's now Fruition Chocolate Works, right? If there's a period at the end of one company name and not another, it's regularized, so it's the same way each individual time. And so I'm cross-checking my data every single time so that I can figure out what it is that I need to do, and I'm as accurate as I can be. I now understand how much more work there is to do in order to make sure this is completely normalized and completely regularized and is usable. I'm very, very close to that, which is really, really cool. So I now have the list of the 47, because I got to subtract 2 of this, 47 companies who have won 3 or more awards over the course of the 15 years, and in which category they won them. So if I had to do this by hand, again, it would be insanely challenging, right? So I was able to upload the spreadsheet and able to say to Claude at this time, just task, generate me a table with the, ordered by the total number of awards, right? And then give me the count in the individual categories, right? With the name of the company in the first column and a count column in the left. I mean, I've just bang, and 30 seconds later, I had the results, right? And I could just cut and paste the markdown because I asked them for the results in markdown format, and I could copy them into a markdown block in Ghost, and voila. I mean, all of this formatting is done for me automatically. I got to tell you, it was so satisfying the first time I was able to get this done. Just copy and paste markdown, bang, it works. Yay. Right. And then realized, oh, this company is mentioned twice. What am I going to do about that? Right. So I'm not going to go back and update the table. I just note that, I added this note here that it's a problem that has to be addressed. Right. So again, if we go look at Patrick here, one of the things that I can infer, right, is that not only is he a highly skilled maker, not only is his presence on the list, but it also reflects two other realities. He probably entered at least 10 of the 15 competition. Actually, I know that he entered 10 because that's a statistic that Gemini pulled out. He did enter 10 of the 15 competitions, and he entered more than one product into one or both categories each year he entered. So, right, what this says is not only is this a self-selected list, I mean, he won 26 awards, right? That meant he, for the 10 years that he entered, he won for 2.6 on average. So he entered at least 3 products every year he entered. Right? So that gives you an idea of what. So if you want to be a highly awarded chocolatier or chocolate maker in the Good Food Awards, you should probably enter at least 3 entries every year. That's what that tells me, right? So, and again, while not inexpensive, the entry fees compared to the potential return from public relations, marketing, and the perhaps better access into distribution, you don't have to sell a lot of chocolate in order to be able to earn back whatever it is that you're investing in fees. All right, so let's go to another thing that was really, really quick to do is I asked it to organize the winners by percentage in the chocolate category. So if we go look at the spreadsheet, we'll see that there's a percentage category. It's copied out of this column automatically. And then what I was able to do was able to ask Claude, generate a table, right, where I've got the percentage of cocoa in one column, the number, right, of the number of times that string appeared, and then the percentage of overall times that a percentage appeared in any column over here. And then give me a table organized by this count. So of the winning awards in the chocolate category, right, it turns out that there were 53 which explicitly mentioned that this bar was 70%. There were 8 that said they were 75%, 6 that said they were 72%, 5 that said they were 74%. And so with 53, 61, 61 and 11 is 72, 46 plus 7, 53. So, I could calculate the percentages. I could ask Claude to calculate the percentages, but we have an idea that if we were just to take the top 4 percentages, they're all in the 70% range, between 70 and 75% specifically, right? Have won 46, 7, 53, 58, 62. So almost 2/3 of the awards are from 4 percentages, right? Which tells us something about the prevalence of percentages that are awarded and what the judges think of a sweet spot. More the first than the latter. But I did the cutoff. Actually, I believe this is a unique list. Every time any percentage is mentioned, it appears in this table. So now you can get an idea. There was only one winner at the 100% category. And if I was really thought about this and I really wanted to do more, I would say find me all the percentages between 70 and 79, and then all of the percentage between 80 and 89, and figure it out that way. And so we could get a little more detail. I can certainly do it, and I can have Claude generate that in like 11 seconds. So I may do it at some point in the future as part of my internal analysis. But what's most important is I have all this data. I have this data in other tables for other awards. And what I can do is I can copy the individual columns from this table into a master table or into a master database, and then have all this data available across all the awards for all the competitions. And for example, I could say, here's a canonical list of working URLs. If you find a company name over here, go and use this URL. Oh, all of a sudden I've got a lot. So for example, at the Academy of Chocolate Awards, they don't give URLs for their winners. There's no way to go to the winners' websites, right? And so I can use this data in part, and from the International Chocolate Awards, I can generate a column with, I can generate a table that's got company names and product names and working URLs, and I can go and populate the URLs for other companies. And I could probably, well, I'm sure I could figure out a prompt that would do that for me relatively automatically, as long as I had all the data in spreadsheets that it could take a look at. So very, very cool. All right. So although the winners of the Good Food Awards are organized by state, so let's go and take this. So let's go look for 2024 into chocolate. You'll notice I can organize this into 5 regions: Central, East, North, South, and West. Right? And it turns out that, there are 3 winners in the East. Right? It turns out it's not very useful to do that. I mean, I can, yay. So it gives me this, it gives me the information. If I could figure out a way to grab the address data from the company here, and notice there's no link to the website. But I don't know how I would go and extract a prompt. This might be, I don't know if this is Google Maps, in which case I might be able to get at the pin data. I don't know, right? But someplace I have address data for each of these companies on this website, and I don't have easy access to it, for which, as you can probably tell, I'm really, really frustrated. But let's get back to taking a look at this. So what I have is the organized by state, winners organized by state. And so what we'll do is we'll find that in the state of Oregon, the #1 winner with a total of 60 awards over 15 years. California is 58, right? Missouri. So Missouri is Askinosie, primarily Askinosie and Patrick are the 2 companies. Creo, right, and Batch PDX, Oregon, right, between the 2 of them, they're on the higher list. So this is just another way of figuring this out. But again, it takes 11 seconds to do this. And for some reason, I was using Gemini to look at this, not Claude at this point, in order to be able to go and do this. But here's the list of all of the individual states which won awards and in what categories they won. I could have put together a totals column on the right, but for one reason or another decided not to do that. Right? But now you can go and look, and we now have very, very quickly, again, this table was put together in under a minute, that I could go and get this data. And it would take me a lot more work if I had to do this, a lot more work to do this by hand. But in order to be able to get all this done, I needed to get all the data in this form first. I need to go to the individual pages, right? Take everything out of it, put it into a spreadsheet, normalize it, which means that the same term is used the same way every single time it shows up, right? And regularize it, which means that everything is spelled the same way every single time it appears. And once I do those 2 things, I can go and do the analysis on it. If I don't, like, I don't catch that Fruition and Fruition Chocolate Works are the same thing, I get data which, while technically correct, don't represent the true state of things. So we need, again, the thing to learn number one is by going through all the steps that I had to go through, I'm gonna jump out of this and make this point really, really forcefully, right? Which is that it was only by going through all the handwork, going through every single page, doing the 28 queries, copying and pasting the data into the spreadsheet. It was only, and then doing the one by one checking of the URLs to find out what the error codes were. And it was only by having that level of familiarity with the underlying data that enabled me to look at what it is that the AI generator, the LLM generator, was Claude, ChatGPT, or Gemini, that enabled me to go, there's something wrong here, or there's something that I wasn't taking into account. That's probably the better way to put it. There's something that I wasn't taking into account when I was creating the prompt. There was something I didn't know or wasn't aware or didn't think about when I put together the prompt that caused the LLM to return a result which made sense given what it had been prompted to do, but didn't actually get at the underlying data in the way that I wanted it to. Really, really important to do. So that's a lesson. Number one is a familiarity with the underlying data set before you go in and start asking the questions is really, really important. And then go realize that if there are any inconsistencies, it's because either A, the data are not fully normalized and fully regularized, or your prompt didn't take into account something that it needed to take into account. But I got to say that this is an inspiration that happened to me on Sunday as I'm sitting here. So today's Tuesday. Sunday, as I'm thinking about doing this, I wonder if what I can get it to do is to go through and look through this column here of product names. And let's go scroll. Let's make this really big and go, oh my gosh, there's a country named here, Belize, and a district called Toledo. And that I told it, Hacienda Victoria, actually explicitly in the prompt, said Hacienda Victoria was a farm in Ecuador, and Tumaco, right, is a place in Colombia. So I gave it some hints, right? And then I asked it to go through and said, can you Semuliki is a forest reserve in Uganda. Right. So there were so I just gave it like 4 hints about places. And this is a cocoa farm, and this is a reserve. Zorzal is in the Dominican Republic. 4 place name hints. Right. And what came back was this table. Now, I suspect that it's incomplete. For example, there is a place name Ambanja, which is associated with Madagascar, right? Ambanja, if I didn't explicitly mention it, it may not have picked up the relationship with Madagascar unless it was explicitly listed in one of the other rows. One of the things I would love to do, and I've started doing, is so here's a word, Ambanja, it is associated with Madagascar. Right, here is Atanariva, it is associated with Madagascar. Here is Chuncho, it is associated with Peru. Right, here is Cacao Gran Blanco, it's normally associated with Piura, again in Peru. CCN 51, it is associated, originally with Ecuador, but Peru and many other places. I want to create a data dictionary, and what I can do is I can feed the data dictionary into these queries to say, here's a lot more data that you can learn from so that you can do a better job of this. But what it did do with a really, really simple prompt is it said the country that we can identify who when identified, won the most awards across all the categories was Madagascar, followed by Belize, Ecuador, Peru, Guatemala. And so it was able to give me a unique list: Vietnam, Chile, Ghana, Jamaica, Liberia. Here are all the countries whose beans were used in award winners. And it did that in 2 minutes, right? And I can tell you it would have been a lot longer to go hunt through every single field and make that. Now, eventually, what I would love to be able to do is I'd love to be able to go, oh, this is 72%, this is Belize, this is Toledo, right? This is 76%, it's Hacienda Victoria. Actually, I'd want to do Ecuador, Hacienda Victoria, right? So eventually, it needs to be incorporated into the underlying data set, but now I have it, right? And I can now create a prompt that will update the table. So It's I can create a column, generate a text file, and say extract from it the following things, and then create additional columns in a table. So that's that's the approach that I use, is to isolate what it is that I want to look at, the LLM to look at, and ask it to go through. But again, this is a table that would have taken me by hand hours to go through the 412 entries line by line and be able to decompose and then cut and paste what needed to get done. It's not perfect, as I say, because I don't necessarily know that it caught every single thing that might be associated with Peru and assigned it to Peru. I don't know that. But for a first cut, right, it's pretty darn good. And so again, right, this is where it began to get real interesting. So I asked it to do that. This is the explicit. If Madagascar is listed, go do this. If Belize is listed, go do that. But then I asked it to go through and say, here is a list of names associated with farms and cocoa varietals by country name. And so I gave it a series of examples, and it said that Maya Mountain is a cacao producer in Belize. The Fazenda Camboa is a cacao farm in Brazil. Specifically, I know it's in the state of Bahia. I've actually been to Fazenda Camboa when I have been to the Chocolate Festival in Elios in Bahia. So Zorzal is a bird sanctuary and cocoa farm. I didn't give it that language. It picked up that language. So Lechua is a cacao origin and a lake associated with Guatemala. Cahabon is a cacao origin river associated with Guatemala, right? Abanya is a cacao origin and plantation associated with Madagascar. Akusen, again, associated with Madagascar. This represents just, if I can tune this, right, and give the prompt more data from the work that I've already done, what I can do is now I've got a data dictionary that I can go and run and include every time I'm running one of these queries against any of the other awards programs, right? Which, as far as I'm concerned, is for me, it's game changing, because it gives me a level of complexity and a level of detail and a level of insight into the reports that I just don't have otherwise. So this disclaimer here, I already talked about at the beginning, and I did do a 2021 Good Food Awards episode of the Chocolate Life Live. So if you want to go and watch that, there is a link here. But before I end today, I've just got a couple of more minutes, and I want to say that one thing I did do is I gave the CSV file with all the results to Gemini, and I asked it to just do deep research, and all I did was do deep research on what's in the CSV file that I gave you, and it wrote a 30 some odd page report around the Good Food Awards. And for me, in part, it generated some tables, and it didn't necessarily generate tables that I would thought of to generate. Not entirely sure why I have that blank page in there, right? But it did give me this rank by state. It's different from the one that was generated by Claude. Not entirely sure. Oregon was number 1. California was number 2. I've got to go figure out what the differences are. And so this is, again, part of the challenges of trusting the LLM. You don't always know what it's doing, and you can't trust it. So we're going to have to go back and figure it out. But they also gave me the names of cities that are associated with it. So, and this is going to be in order. So in California, 68 awards over 15 years, but almost all of them the majority of them came from San Francisco, Oakland, LA, Sacramento, and Eureka. So most of them are Northern California, with only Los Angeles. San Diego is not there. In Oregon, we find that it's Portland, Bend, and Eugene. In North Carolina, not surprising, we find Asheville. That's where French Broad is. Raleigh, Chapel Hill. Raleigh is where the dairy is, if I recall correctly. So in New York, it's got Brooklyn and New York City. Brooklyn is in New York City, not Manhattan. So it's kind of weird, and you need to go through and iterate and figure out what's going on. but it just top 10 states by total good food awards 2011 to 2025. That's a table it decided that it wanted to run, so which I think is pretty cool. Um, and then it also generated, there's another table. Oh, you know what? It's not showing it at this zoom level. There's another table that it generated, and for some reason that table is missing now. I'm gonna have to go figure out why that table is missing. I may have accidentally deleted it. Anyway, uh, so this is um, a different version of a different version of the table. So it's Patrick Chocolate from Missouri. Now, this is why I know that they entered in 10 years, because it says 10 years. It let me know which years it entered. So, I mean, there's some data there. Again, this is something it chose to do, not something that I asked it to do. So I thought that was very, very cool that it went and did that. But I think that, again, when I talked about the ephemeral nature, about businesses closing and URLs not working anymore, this idea, the pattern is not an indictment of the Good Food Awards. On contrary, it illustrates the immense economic precarity, right? So precariousness that even the most talented and celebrated artisans face, thin profit margins, other business challenges. So there is actually, read really, really closely, and try to get rid of the flowery language. I may ask it to rewrite this in a different tone of voice and just say, get rid of the flowery language, give it to me straightforward. I want it like a news reporter might do it. But it picks out names and it picks out trends, really, really important. But it also picked out something that you might know, but not really pay attention to, right? And this is what makes the Good Food Awards different from other awards programs, right? And one of which is it's under a section called the Ecosystem of Good Food, a multi-program approach. And the Good Food Awards, which is run by the Good Food Foundations, originally the Seedlings Project, when I started 2011, 2012, they've renamed themselves, right? Now, after the awards, so the Good Food Awards came first, run by Seedlings Project, and then they decided to call it themselves, rename themselves the Good Food Foundation, right? Is number one, it consists of 4 parts. Number one, there is an awards program, right? Number two is there's a guild, right? It's a national trade association for food companies that meet the GFA standard. So there's a community of nearly 500 like-minded businesses across more than 45 states. So there is if I can become a member of the Good Food Guild, right? I have something called the Good Food Mercantile, which is described here as an untrade show, right? And then there is a funding program now called Alliance and Works. So there are dollars which come in from fundraising efforts, which can be used to grow the ecosystem. When we think about these 4 things together, awards, guild, mercantile, and the Alliance and Works, these 4 things are what separates the Good Food Awards from all other awards programs. It is one of, so at the International Chocolate Awards, they're only awards. They do some maybe online promotion, Instagram and things like that, and you've got a little sticker that you can put on things, but there's no, when they do the awards, there's no gathering of the awards winners where the products are available for sale to the general public, for example, right? And that's one of the things that happens in the mercantile, right? There's no association of winners of International Chocolate Awards, because that's not the way it works. I suppose that if I became a member of the Academy of Chocolate, then I'm part of the Academy of Chocolate. And this is explicitly part of what's called the AVPA, which is the Agency for Valorization of Agricultural Products. So the Agence Valorisation de Produits Agricoles, that's what the name is in French. And in order to enter the awards, you must essentially become a member of AVPA, which is like joining the guild, right? So, but there is no mercantile associated with the AVPA, and there's no development fund associated with the AVPA here. Northwest Chocolate Festival, there's an awards program. If you want to be at the Northwest Chocolate Festival, then that's the mercantile program, but there is no guild. you're not a member of the Northwest Chocolate Festival. Maybe you're a member of the Chocolate Alliance. Not sure how Brian does that to work. But the whole way in which the Good Food Awards is structured, right, is in these four elements, is what makes it a force for good in ways that are very, very different from other awards programs. And I wanted to highlight that here at the end of the program to really emphasize why I'm doing this, because they're an aspect of what's going on their website that does not serve their winners well. And I'm hoping that by sending the data that I have collected in the form that I have collected with the notes that I have collected, that what they'll do is they'll update the website and make it more available. And then hopefully what they'll do is they'll actually turn around and say, okay, we have all this data about addresses for each one of these companies. I could get it. Yeah, I could get it. Um, I could ask one of the LLMs to go, here's the name of a company, go find their website or find their address and information for me. Something that I will experiment with, and hopefully I can hand it a list of 10 URLs and it will give and company names, and it will find the data for me. We'll figure how that's going to work. But that's what I wanted to talk to you about today when it comes to what I've been doing with the Good Food Awards 2025 um, uh, and the last 15 years of the Good Food Awards, um, in chocolate and confectionery. By the way, if I had time, I would have done this for all of the other categories. I have the approach. I can do it for all the other categories. I don't have the time to do it for all the other categories, even though I wish I did. It would be interesting to get the entire data set together and figure it out. And maybe someone who is associated with the Good Food Foundation would be interested in coming up with the funds to make it happen. Or maybe you would, as a member of the Chocolate Life, because this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. Go click the green button on the Chocolate Life at the top nav. I'm logged in, so it says account. If you go there, it'll say join. Become a member. There's always a free membership. If you do have the resources to support me with a cash contribution, I don't take advertising. I'm not doing any other form of Patreon or anything like that. Memberships in the Chocolate Life support what it is that I do. This is the post for today's episode, and here is the homepage of TheChocolateLife.com. You'll notice that on the homepage right now, there is a call to action. So if you have a suggestion for an article or topic that you would like me to cover, click on this brown button. It'll launch your email client, and you'll be able to send me a note saying, hey, Clay, I'd like you to talk about this, or I'd like you to cover that. You can also go to the bottom of each post. If you're a member and you're logged in, there's a comment section. You can put a comment on the post, or you can do that on LinkedIn, Facebook, or on YouTube after in the comment sections. And after this gets done, the live chat replay is no longer there in YouTube, but the comments will be there. And with that, that's it for today. That's it for today. It is the 15th of July, Tuesday. Yesterday was Bastille Day. I do want to do one more thing before I go, which is I want to give a quick shout out to a colleague of mine. If people have been paying attention, or maybe not paying attention, let me do a quick screen share over here. What I want to do is point out that Stefan Bonat, who is his family's chocolate, is what inspired me to get back into the chocolate business in 1994, was inducted into the French Legion of Honor on Sunday the 13th. He is one of a very small number of chocolate makers who have been inducted into the French Legion of Honor. I list a few of them here on the page. I've done a little bit more research to find the complete list of chocolatiers, confectioners, pâtissiers who are in the French Legion of Honor. And it's a list, and I'm going to be talking about that in more detail, I think, this coming Friday. But I did want to mention that as I close out today. And with that, everybody, we've come to the end of this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. And I want to remind you, as I do at the end of every episode, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, everybody, ciao.